The courthouse hallway smelled of old wood and anxiety. Iris Morgan sat on the hard bench outside courtroom 3, her fingers twisted together in her lap, watching the second hand of the wall clock move with excruciating slowness. 18 months. That's how long her marriage to Ethan Blackwood had lasted. 18 months of passion, arguments, love, and ultimately, suffocating control that had left her gasping for freedom. The door opened, and her lawyer emerged, Sandra Chen, a sharp woman in her 40s who'd guided Iris through this process with practical sympathy. "They're ready for us." Iris stood, smoothing down her navy dress. She'd chosen it carefully this morning, professional, dignified, nothing that would give Ethan the satisfaction of thinking she'd dressed for him. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror had shown dark circles under her brown eyes, but she'd covered them with makeup. She needed to look strong today, even if she felt like she was barely holding herself together. The courtroom was smaller than she'd expected, less dramatic than the movie versions she'd seen. Ethan was already there, standing beside his lawyer, looking infuriatingly composed in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. His dark hair was styled precisely, his jaw set in that familiar line of determination. When their eyes met, something flickered across his face, regret, maybe, or just acknowledgement, before his expression smoothed back into careful neutrality. The proceedings were mercifully brief. The judge, a tired-looking woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewed the settlement agreement they'd negotiated over painful months. No children. No contested property. A clean break, as clean as divorce could be. "Do you both agree to the terms as stated?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," they said in unison, their voices overlapping in a way that used to feel romantic and now just felt sad. Iris signed first, her hand surprisingly steady as she wrote her name on the document that would legally sever her from Ethan. The pen scratched against paper, a sound that felt final and irrevocable. Then Ethan signed, his signature bold and decisive, so characteristically him, confident even in ending them. "The divorce is granted," the judge declared, and just like that, Iris was no longer a wife. They gathered their belongings in silence, lawyers exchanging final paperwork while Iris and Ethan carefully avoided looking at each other. The relief Iris had expected to feel was absent, replaced by a hollow exhaustion that seemed to settle into her bones. Outside the courtroom, Sandra touched her arm gently. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Iris lied. "Thank you for everything." "Take care of yourself, Iris." Iris nodded, clutching her purse against her side as she walked toward the exit. The courthouse steps stretched down to the street below, granite worn smooth by decades of feet. The autumn sun was too bright, making her squint against its glare. She heard Ethan's footsteps behind her but didn't turn around. What was there left to say? They'd said it all in lawyers' offices and tense phone calls, accusations and defenses, hurt feelings and broken promises. "Iris." His voice made her pause despite herself. She turned halfway, seeing him standing a few steps above her, his expression unreadable. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said quietly. The words should have been kind, but they landed like criticism, as if her wanting independence, wanting to be seen as an equal rather than something to be managed and controlled, was some character flaw. Iris opened her mouth to respond, but suddenly the world tilted. The bright sunlight fractured into prisms. The stone steps seemed to shift beneath her feet. She'd been feeling off for weeks, dizzy spells, waves of nausea, crushing fatigue that no amount of sleep could fix. She'd attributed it to stress, to the emotional toll of ending her marriage. But now, standing on the courthouse steps with Ethan's eyes on her, everything went wrong at once. The weakness hit her first, draining the strength from her legs. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel, sound muffling as if she were underwater. She saw Ethan's expression change from composed to alarmed, saw him move toward her, but it was too slow, everything was too slow. "Iris." Her name sounded far away. Her purse fell from her hands, contents scattering across the stone. She reached out for something, anything to steady herself, but there was only air. And then she was falling. The impact should have hurt, granite is unforgiving, but Iris barely felt it. Her body crumpled against the steps, her head hitting stone with a sickening crack that echoed in the sudden chaos of voices. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Ethan's face, closer now, his careful composure completely shattered as he dropped to his knees beside her. His hands touched her face, her shoulders, and for the first time in months, she heard real emotion in his voice. "Someone call an ambulance. Iris, can you hear me? Iris." But she couldn't answer. The world was already gone, swallowed by black. Above her, Ethan felt his heart stop as Iris's eyes fluttered closed. Her body was limp in his arms, her skin pale, and for one terrible moment, he thought he'd lost her in a way far more final than divorce. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, Iris. Stay with me." The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and paramedics asking questions Ethan couldn't properly answer. When did she last eat? He didn't know. Any medical conditions? Not that he was aware of. Was she taking any medications? How would he know? They'd barely spoken in months except through lawyers. But when the paramedic asked if he was her husband, Ethan said yes without hesitation, even though as of 20 minutes ago, that was no longer legally true. Iris remained unconscious, an oxygen mask over her face, and 4-line in her arm. Ethan held her other hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that felt both familiar and heartbreaking. Her hand was cold, and he tried to warm it between both of his, as if he could somehow transfer his life force into her through touch alone. "We're almost there," the paramedic said, and Ethan nodded without looking away from Iris's face. At the hospital, everything happened too fast. Iris was wheeled away on a gurney, doctors and nurses surrounding her in practiced choreography. Ethan tried to follow, but a nurse stopped him gently. "You need to wait here, sir. The doctors will update you as soon as they know something." "But I'm her," he stopped. What was he? Not her husband anymore. Not her emergency contact. Just the man who'd spent 18 months loving her wrong and 3 months trying to forget her. "Please. I need to know she's okay." The nurse's expression softened. "I understand. Have a seat. Someone will come talk to you soon." The waiting room was purgatory painted in neutral tones. Ethan sat in an uncomfortable chair, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. Fear clawed at his chest, raw, primal fear that he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He'd built his entire life around control, around certainty and measured responses. But there was no controlling this, no architectural blueprint for what to do when the woman you loved, still loved, he could admit now, collapsed on courthouse steps after signing papers that ended your marriage. An hour passed. Then another. Ethan called his assistant and cancelled his afternoon meetings. He called Sandra Chen, Iris's lawyer, who promised to reach out to Iris's best friend, Maya. He didn't call his own lawyer, didn't call his parents. He just sat and waited and tried not to think about all the things he should have said differently, all the ways he'd failed her. Family for Iris Morgan? Ethan shot to his feet. A doctor in scrubs stood in the doorway, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and graying hair. Ethan caught himself. "I'm Ethan. We were just. I was with her when she collapsed. Is she okay?" The doctor glanced at his tablet. "Ms. Morgan is stable. She's awake and asking for you, actually." The fainting was caused by a combination of dehydration, low blood sugar, and significant stress on her system. Relief flooded through Ethan so powerfully his knees nearly buckled. "Can I see her?" "In a moment. There's something else you should know." The doctor paused, choosing his words carefully. "We ran comprehensive tests to rule out any serious conditions. Ms. Morgan is pregnant. Approximately 12 weeks. The world stopped spinning. What? She's pregnant, the doctor repeated gently. She didn't know. Given the circumstances, the divorce proceedings, the stress, it's not surprising she missed the signs. Early pregnancy symptoms can be easily attributed to other things. Ethan couldn't breathe. Pregnant. Iris was pregnant. With his child. They'd signed divorce papers an hour ago, and now. Does she know? His voice came out hoarse. I just told her a few minutes ago. She's processing the information. I wanted to let you know before you went in case. Which room? Ethan interrupted. Room 304. Third floor. But Mr. Blackwood, please keep in mind that she's been through a significant shock. Ethan was already moving, heading for the elevators with single-minded purpose. His mind raced, thoughts tumbling over each other in chaotic succession. A baby. Their baby. 3 months ago, they'd still been married, still sharing a bed even if they weren't sharing much else. He tried to remember, had it been that last night before she moved out? That moment of weakness when grief and desire had tangled together? The elevator took forever. Ethan stared at the ascending numbers, his reflection ghostly in the metal doors. He looked wrecked, tie askew, hair disheveled from running his hands through it, his carefully maintained composure completely destroyed. Room 304 was at the end of a quiet hallway. Ethan paused outside the door, his hand on the handle, trying to prepare himself for whatever he'd find on the other side. But how did you prepare for this? How did you walk into a room and face the woman you just divorced, who was now carrying your child? He knocked softly and pushed the door open. Iris was sitting up in the hospital bed, looking small and pale against the white sheets. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders, hospital gown replacing her navy dress. When she looked up at him, her brown eyes were filled with so many emotions Ethan couldn't parse them all: fear, confusion, anger, and something else that looked almost like longing. Ethan. I heard, he said quietly, closing the door behind him. The doctor told me. Iris's hand moved to her stomach unconsciously, a protective gesture that made Ethan's chest ache. This doesn't change anything, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Iris. We just got divorced, Ethan. We signed the papers. We're done. We're having a baby. The words felt surreal coming out of his mouth. That changes everything. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she angrily wiped them away. I don't want you to feel obligated. Obligated? Ethan crossed the room, stopping at the edge of her bed. Iris, that's my child. Our child. How could I feel anything but? He stopped, overwhelmed by emotions he didn't have names for. But we couldn't make our marriage work. How are we supposed to raise a child together? It was the question neither of them could answer, hanging in the air between them like smoke. The silence in the hospital room felt heavy with unspoken history. Iris stared at the white ceiling tiles, trying to make sense of how her life had spiraled so completely out of control in the span of a few hours. Divorced and pregnant. The irony wasn't lost on her. Do you remember where we met? Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. Iris closed her eyes. The Hartwell Gallery opening. 2 years ago. She could still picture it, the crowded gallery filled with Chicago's elite, champagne flowing, abstract paintings she'd spent months curating finally on display. She'd been in her element, confident and radiant in a red dress, discussing the artist's use of negative space with a potential buyer when she'd felt someone watching her. Ethan had been standing across the room, magnetic in a way that had nothing to do with his expensive suit. When their eyes met, something had clicked into place. He'd approached her with a confidence that should have been arrogant but somehow wasn't, asking intelligent questions about the artwork that proved he'd actually been listening to her earlier conversation. They'd talked for 3 hours straight, long after the other guests had left. About art and architecture, about how both required seeing beyond what existed to imagine what could be. He'd walked her to her car, asked for her number, and called her the next morning to invite her to breakfast. Their courtship had been intense. Ethan pursued her with single-minded focus, flowers delivered to her office, surprise weekend trips, thoughtful gifts that showed he actually paid attention to her interests. Iris had fallen hard and fast, overwhelmed by the force of his attention, by feeling so completely seen and wanted. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony that Iris's best friend Maya had called beautiful but rushed. Maya had been right to worry. The problem started small. Ethan suggesting she didn't need to work late when he'd made dinner reservations. Ethan questioning why she needed to travel to New York for a gallery consultation when she could send an assistant. Ethan frowning when she wore an outfit he deemed too revealing for a work function. At first, Iris had found it endearing, evidence that he cared, that he wanted to spend time with her. But the suggestions became expectations. The questions became accusations. The concern became control. The breaking point had come 6 months ago. Iris had been offered a dream opportunity, assistant director position at the Museum of Contemporary Art. It would mean longer hours, more travel, significantly more responsibility. She'd been ecstatic. Ethan had been furious. "You don't need that kind of stress," he'd said, his voice calm but firm. "We're financially secure. Why put yourself through that?" "Because it's my career," Iris had replied, stunned. "Because I've worked toward this for years. I provide everything you need. Why isn't that enough?" That question had crystallized everything wrong between them. Ethan didn't see her as a partner, he saw her as something to provide for, to protect, to manage, like one of his construction projects. Her ambitions, her independence, her very selfhood were inconveniences to be minimized. The fights that followed had been brutal. Iris took the job. Ethan sulked and made passive-aggressive comments about her, choosing work over marriage. When her colleague Marcus, a gay man happily married to his husband, became a close friend, Ethan's jealousy had been absurd and insulting. "I don't like how much time you spend with him," Ethan had said. "He's my colleague and my friend. It doesn't look appropriate." That had been the final straw. Iris had moved out the next week, filed for divorce a month later. And now, 3 months later, here they were, legally divorced and biologically bound together forever. "I was controlling," Ethan said quietly, pulling her from the memories. "I know that now. I thought I was protecting you, but I was suffocating you." Iris looked at him, surprised by the admission. "Yes. You were. I'm sorry, Iris. For all of it." His voice cracked slightly. "I loved you so much it scared me. And instead of trusting that love, I tried to control it. Control you. I wanted you safe and close in mine, and I didn't stop to think about what you wanted." Tears burned in Iris's eyes again. "I wanted you to see me as an equal. As a person with my own dreams and goals. Not as something to be managed." "I know." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she recognized. "I know that now. Too late, apparently. The baby." The reality crashed over Iris again. She was carrying Ethan's child, conceived during that last painful night before she'd moved out, when they'd reached for each other one final time, trying to find comfort in familiar touch even as their marriage crumbled around them. "What are we going to do?" she whispered. Ethan met her eyes, and she saw genuine uncertainty there, something she'd rarely seen from him before. "I don't know. But I want to be part of this. Part of our child's life. If you'll let me. This doesn't mean we're getting back together. I know. I can't go back to how things were, Ethan. I won't. I'm not asking you to." He stepped closer to the bed. "I'm just asking for a chance to be a father. To be present. To do better than I did as a husband." Iris studied his face, searching for signs of manipulation or control. But all she saw was sincerity and fear, raw, honest emotion that Ethan usually kept locked away. "Okay," she said finally. "But we need boundaries. Clear ones. Whatever you need. As Ethan sat in the chair beside her bed, maintaining careful distance, Iris wondered if it was possible for two people who'd failed so spectacularly at marriage to succeed at co-parenting. Or if this baby would just become another battleground for their unresolved issues. Iris was discharged from the hospital the next morning with instructions to rest, stay hydrated, and follow up with an OB/GYN within the week. Ethan had stayed the entire night, sleeping, or trying to, in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed, despite her protests that he should go home. Now they stood in the hospital parking lot, an awkward silence stretching between them. "I can call a car," Iris said, pulling out her phone. "Don't be ridiculous. I'll drive you home." "Ethan, Iris, you collapsed yesterday. You're pregnant. I'm not letting you take a rideshare across the city." His tone had that edge of command that used to make her bristle, but he seemed to catch himself. "Please. Let me drive you." She was too tired to argue. "Fine." The drive to her apartment was quiet, tension filling the car like a third passenger. Iris stared out the window, watching Chicago pass by, the familiar streets she'd driven countless times, now feeling strange and new. Everything felt different now. "Have you told anyone?" Ethan asked as they hit a red light. "About the baby?" "No. You're the only one who knows besides the medical staff." "Are you going to tell your parents?" Iris laughed without humor. "My mother is going to have a field day with this." "Divorced and pregnant, Iris? Really?" She mimicked her mother's disapproving tone perfectly. "They'll come around. Once they meet their grandchild." The word, grandchild, made it all feel suddenly, startlingly real. There was a baby growing inside her. A tiny person who would have Ethan's dark hair, maybe, or her brown eyes. A child who would exist in the complicated space between divorced parents who'd loved each other once but couldn't make it work. When they pulled up to her apartment building, Ethan put the car in park but didn't turn off the engine. "I meant what I said, Iris. I want to be involved. Doctor's appointments, decisions, everything. I know you think you want that now, I don't think. I know." He turned to face her fully. "This child is mine as much as yours. I'm not going to be an absent father. I never said you would be. But Ethan, we can barely stand to be in the same room together. How are we supposed to co-parent? We'll figure it out." "That's not a plan. That's hope." "Then what do you suggest?" His frustration was showing now. "Because I'm trying here, Iris. I'm trying to do the right thing, and you keep pushing me away. Because every time you're near me, I remember why I left." The words burst out, louder than she intended. "I remember feeling suffocated and controlled and like I was disappearing into what you wanted me to be. And I'm terrified that if I let you in now, even just as a co-parent, you'll start doing it again." Ethan flinched as if she'd struck him. "I'm not that person anymore." "You've been that person for 2 days, Ethan. 2 days since we signed the divorce papers. That's not enough time to change." "Then what is? How long do I have to prove I'm different before you believe me?" Iris opened the car door, needing space, needing air. "I don't know. But right now, I need to process this alone. I'll call you when I've scheduled the OB appointment. You can come if you want." "Of course I want to come." She nodded, stepping out of the car. But before she could close the door, Ethan spoke again. "Iris. I never stopped loving you. Even when I was signing those papers. Even when we were at our worst. I just loved you wrong." The confession hung in the air between them. Iris felt tears prick her eyes again. She was so tired of crying, but forced them back. "Love isn't enough, Ethan. We proved that already." She closed the door and walked to her building without looking back, even though she could feel his eyes on her until she disappeared inside. 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Ethan showed up to the first OB appointment exactly on time, sitting beside Iris in the waiting room with obvious nervousness. When they heard the baby's heartbeat for the first time, a rapid, fluttering sound that filled the exam room, Iris saw tears in Ethan's eyes that he didn't bother to hide. He didn't push for more than she offered. He texted to check on her but didn't call constantly. He sent over groceries when she mentioned struggling with morning sickness but didn't show up uninvited. He was present without being overbearing, supportive without being controlling. It was disconcerting. "He's being weird," Iris told Maya over coffee, decaf now, at their favorite cafe. "Respectful and considerate and giving me space." Maya raised an eyebrow. "And this is a problem because it's not like him. The Ethan I married would have already tried to take over my entire pregnancy, hired a nutritionist, and probably started interviewing nannies. Maybe he's actually changed. People can, you know. In 3 weeks? Maybe the divorce and the baby were the wake-up call he needed." Maya reached across the table and squeezed Iris's hand. "I'm not saying you should get back together. God knows that man put you through hell. But maybe you can trust him to be a good father even if he wasn't a good husband." Iris wanted to believe that. But trust was hard when it had been so thoroughly broken. The shift came on a Saturday afternoon. Ethan had offered to help assemble the crib Iris had ordered. She was starting to show now, just slightly, and the reality of needing actual baby furniture had set in. She'd agreed mainly because she had no idea how to use a screwdriver. He arrived with coffee, regular for him, herbal tea for her, and they spread the crib pieces across her living room floor. The instruction manual might as well have been in hieroglyphics. "This piece connects to this one," Ethan said, his architect's brain making sense of the diagrams quickly. "Hand me that dowel." They worked in comfortable silence, and Iris found herself relaxing in his presence for the first time in months. This was the Ethan she'd fallen for, capable and focused, but not controlling. Working with her, not over her. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said as he tightened a bolt. "Sure. That last night. Before you moved out. Did you know then? About the baby?" Iris shook her head. "No. I didn't know until the hospital. But I'd been feeling off for weeks. I just thought it was stress from the divorce." "Why did you?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Why did we sleep together?" Iris finished for him. She'd asked herself the same question 100 times. "I don't know. Grief, maybe. Or nostalgia. One last time trying to feel something good between us." "It was good." Ethan's voice was quiet. "It always was. That was never our problem." "No. Our problem was everything outside the bedroom." They finished the crib in silence, and when Ethan stood back to admire their work, Iris felt a pang of something she didn't want to name. This could have been their life, assembling furniture together, preparing for their child, building a future. But they destroyed that possibility with poor communication and worse behavior. "I went to therapy," Ethan said suddenly. Iris looked up, surprised. "What? After you moved out?" "I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Richardson. She specializes in control issues and attachment trauma." He sat on her couch, looking vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "I had a lot to unpack. My father was controlling. My mother was passive. I learned that love meant managing and protecting, not trusting and supporting." "Ethan. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me or to excuse what I did. I'm telling you because you deserve to know that I understand now. I understand what I did to you, to us. And I'm working on changing." Iris sat beside him, leaving space between them. "That's good. I'm glad you're doing that work. For yourself and for our child. And maybe for you too," Ethan said, looking at her directly. "If you'd ever want I mean, I know we're divorced. I know I destroyed what we had. But Iris, these past few weeks, being around you again, seeing you pregnant with our child. Don't. Iris held up a hand. Don't say something we'll both regret. I love you. The words came out anyway, raw and honest. I still love you, and I don't know if I'll ever stop. And I know you probably can't love me back after everything I put you through, but I needed you to know. Iris felt her heart hammering. The smart thing would be to shut this down, to maintain the boundaries they'd established. But when she looked at Ethan, really looked at him, she didn't see the controlling, jealous man who'd driven her away. She saw someone who was genuinely trying, who was doing the hard work of changing, who was showing up consistently without demands or expectations. I don't know if I can do this again, she whispered. I don't know if I can trust you not to hurt me. Then don't trust me yet. Let me earn it back. Slowly. One day at a time. Ethan shifted closer, and when Iris didn't pull away, he reached for her hand. We don't have to rush anything. We don't even have to call it a relationship. But maybe we could try being honest with each other. About what we feel. About what we want. What do you want? You. Our family. A chance to love you the way you deserve to be loved, as a partner, not a possession. Iris's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared. Me too. They sat in silence, hands intertwined, the half-assembled crib standing like a promise of the future they were creating whether they planned to or not. And slowly, carefully, Iris leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder. We should try couples therapy, she said quietly. If we're going to even consider this. We need professional help. I'll call Dr. Richardson on Monday. She can recommend someone. And we take it slow. No moving back in together. No rushing. We rebuild from the ground up. Okay. And if you ever make me feel controlled or diminished again. I won't, Ethan promised. And if I start slipping into old patterns, I want you to call me on it immediately. No more letting things fester. Iris lifted her head to look at him. His dark eyes were sincere, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen during their marriage. Maybe people could change. Maybe second chances were possible, even after everything they'd been through. One day at a time, she agreed. Ethan smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. One day at a time. When he kissed her, it was different from that last desperate night before she'd moved out. This kiss was tentative, questioning, asking permission rather than taking. And when Iris kissed him back, she felt something she'd thought was dead, hope. They had a long road ahead. Therapy sessions and difficult conversations and the constant work of rebuilding trust that had been shattered. But as Iris placed Ethan's hand on her slightly rounded belly and felt the flutter of movement, their baby, their future, she thought maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. Not to who they were before, but to something better. Something built on honesty and respect and the hard-won knowledge that love without freedom wasn't love at all. Outside, the Chicago afternoon faded into evening. Inside Iris's apartment, two people who'd failed at marriage began the tentative work of building something new, not a reconciliation, not yet, but the possibility of one. And for now, that was enough.